Good morning, Brave fans, and welcome to a special edition of Brave Live. Unfortunately, this week's brought the report of the end of the opportunity for an AIHL season for 2020, which everyone is obviously devastated about. It's a huge disappointment, but it makes perfect sense that our health and the health of the players has to come first. Today, we've got a special edition. We're talking to Dan Amodio, the CEO of the Brave, about all sorts of questions you may have in regards to the cancellation of the season, what may happen for the future, will we see any hockey in 2020, and what may be happening for 2021. So in regards to that, we've all got many questions about the decision, as well as what it means for hockey for the rest of 2020. So here to answer those questions is Dan Amodio. Welcome to the show, Dan.
Good morning, Murray. How are you?
Very good, thank you.
Great.
Got a lot of questions here. Obviously, it's been a very tumultuous season this year as to what's happened. We haven't been able to have any hockey, which has been pretty devastating to our amazing fans. What are your thoughts on the 2020 season?
Fair to say it didn't go according to plan. I think when we started off on this journey, I guess officially starting from November of last year, after last season, we immediately started planning about 2020. We had a lot of hopes, a lot of dreams, and none of this was a part of it. It's hard to kind of keep context sometimes that there's a lot of people going through some really hard times at the moment, and that's at the top of the mind. But just as disappointing for us is to lose the 2020 season. And it really kind of sinks in and feels even more disappointing when you talk to some of the players who are just, and have been since that semifinal game last year, ready to get back on the ice. Some of these guys, they haven't really had a winter without hockey in a really long time. There's always been something going on, so to completely remove that is hard. And same thing with a lot of the diehard members, who it's a big part of their winter is coming out to a dozen or a couple dozen Brave games throughout the winter and standing outside waiting and having a coffee outside before you get in and then going nuts in the Brave game. It's a big part of their winter. It's a big part of who they are. So that's when the disappointment really kind of sinks in, when you realize that we do play a big role for a lot of people. And at the same time, it had to happen. It was the right decision. We're behind it 100%. We earlier on this winter, we had, in that April, May timeframe, we were still feeling pretty good that there was some chance to do something, even if it was abbreviated, something that felt like a season. But really it was after the outbreak in Victoria. It was really clear that anything we did, we weren't going to be able to keep the players safe. We weren't going to be able to keep the fans safe. We weren't even going to really be able to have the kind of crowds that really make hockey special. So it wasn't worth it.
It's very true. It was clear that with the games, it kind of would have been like inviting half the family to Christmas,
right?
With the hockey community, which we're all missing. That sense of community that we get every Saturday, every second Saturday and Sunday, that I know I'm missing, and I'm sure the rest of the Brave community is really missing. What could have they expected to have seen in 2020? I know we had a pretty dynamic lineup of imports. We had a really, really hard-charging set of locals that were really keen to play. Can you tell us what might have been?
Oh, God. Okay. We had a lot of exciting stuff planned for 2020, but the one thing that is the most disappointing with everything is that this was a championship year for us. This was the year that we were ready to bring the cup back to Canberra. We're not talking about like the EA Sports Cup or whatever the league did with their simulation, their video game simulation, which was, it's nice to win something. It's good to get the chip.
But thanks to Fifth Liners there.
Yeah, thanks guys. But this this was the one. I mean, the roster was probably 90% complete by the time we postponed, and eventually shut it down. Jamie and Jordy and the guys have done an incredible job at putting together a squad that was just going to run. It was going to be fantastic. It was a great mix of local stars, a couple of new faces, and a handful of imports who were at a very, very high level. And just from the conversation with them, it was an obvious culture fit with the team as well. So, of course, it's going to go down in history as a weird year. There's going to be a champion in 2018. There's going to be one in 2019. There's going to be one in 2021. But 2020 is going to be the gap year, and it's going to be weird in the history of the AHL. I know that this would have been a brave championship year because we were really on pace to do something well. And then when you add in the fact that this team, like I mentioned earlier, was hungry, man. Like they were ready to go after an abbreviated or a premature exit last season. They were ready to go. So that's the biggest thing that we all kind of expected this year, and we'll be ready to get into next year. We also had a handful of kind of off the ice plans. You know, like one of the things that we had planned was this. I mean, you guys, the guys behind the cameras over there, and you, Murray, as part of Wonky's production, this was a big part of our plans. I mean, you must be looking forward to getting back out and broadcasting the games and doing the live streams.
I know Sledge and I have been really missing doing the commentary of each and every game locally, and meeting with the fans, interviewing the players. It's the first year since Braves' inception that we haven't really had that going on. But you know, as you said before, it's just one of those things, and I think the right thing is always to care about our players and care about our fans as the first principle. One of the big questions a lot of people have asked, I mean, obviously our league is completely dependent on ticketing for financials. It's having big crowds turn out. How are we doing financially as a team? I know there's some concern within the hockey community that you know that this might be the end of the Brave, and it might be the end of some of the other clubs. Can you give us some insight into that?
Again, also the context of a question like this, you have to just keep it in context for the overall, you know, state of Australia, the state of the world. It's really not a matter of, you know, how'd you do through 2020? It's have you survived through 2020? And that's not unique to us. That's not unique to our industry. It's not unique to the other clubs in the comp. It's just businesses across the board. So we, thankfully, are going to be fine. We've survived this wave financially. We're in a good position to head into 2021 and really start putting into some of our plans in place. On the financial side, we were both really unlucky because it happened and wiped out the entire season. So that's really unlucky, obviously. However, when it happened, because we would have postponed officially because it was right after baby was born. So it would have been like that mid-March. It would have been like 17th or 18th of March or somewhere around there. We decided to postpone the season. Also the right decision at the time. Because it happened then, we had already spent a lot of money. There's a lot of preseason costs that go into running the team. The team was already out training. We had press play and a lot of stuff. We put a bunch of deposits down on flights for the guys for the season. So we had spent a lot of money. However, we didn't spend money on like flying some of the imports over and putting them up in apartments. So there was still that big chunk of money. The way we plan our season from a risk standpoint is to prepare for things like this. So we try to leave big expenditures to the last minute so we're not exposed. So we were lucky enough to be able to do that. For instance, if this had happened, you know, the week after the season started and they decided to shut everything down, we would be in trouble because we would have spent a lot of the money to get ready for the season and had none of the revenue coming back. So I haven't spoken to the other teams about this particularly. I haven't had the chance. I know some of them are in slightly different situations because some of them are also rink owners, and the rinks have been hit just as hard, obviously. But I think it'll be true for them as well, that they would have I think we might have just narrowly avoided the knockout punch, even though we got knocked around a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and I'm hoping that all of our other clubs, our competition out there is also doing okay financially, and we see them all come back strongly in 2021.
Yeah. So our players, sorry to cut you off, Murray, but so we've obviously talked about the connection between the Cavalry and the Brave a lot, and it's a big part of how our business is structured to have both teams under one kind of umbrella. That said, the teams from a financial standpoint are run separately to protect each individual team. So we don't have one team putting the other one at risk. That said, we're taking elements from the others to make it work. One of the things that was really successful on the Cavalry side was we created a local ownership group that became genuine, authentic shareholders of the team. That helped us in a couple of ways. One, it allowed us to get some really smart people in the room to help us make decisions about the growth of the team. But two, it also helped us to raise a pool of money that can protect the organization through ups and downs. We had planned on 2020 being the year we could start recruiting some of those owners for the Brave. Obviously, we weren't able to do that. We're just going to push that back, and we're going to start that process now and planning into going into 2021. So next season, we're okay at the moment, and we're going to continue and ramp up into the season pretty strong.
Fantastic. How has the club, outside of obviously our Brave Live, engaged with fans, engaged with sponsors during the break and play?
Yeah, I'll say it again. You guys have done a fantastic job at that. I think it was right around the time that we shut things down, or at least postponed it, that Sonny and you and Cody and Sledge and the guys at Wonky had started talking about, okay, we've got to do something. We've got all this energy, we're ready to go, and we can't just go dark for 6 months and plan this thing out. So I think one of the great legacies of this break is that what you guys have created here is something special, and we can continue this on next year, and even when we have regular games, we can continue to put content out like this that's really engaging. That said, also, Sonny's done a good job at leading some pretty cool social media campaigns. I like the Anytime Fitness challenge that Steven and the team put together, benefiting Men's Link. Man, I can't remember the last time Mario Kart came into my life as like a relevant. It's just like a relevant thing to follow. I was a Mario Kart 64 guy, so like this new stuff is a little bit beyond my skill level, but it was great to see that as part of the content going in. So you guys deserve a lot of credit for putting some stuff out there. The sponsors have been equally supportive. We've had conversation with sponsors that have said, listen, we're going to stick with you through all of this. Some of the names that you still see on the broadcast, the CBR, Anytime Fitness, Tab, RSM, MEJ, these are supporters that we had that hard conversation with them, like, we're not going to have a season. And they're like, you know what, that's fine. We're going to stick with you. We're in this for the long haul. And we've been having conversations with them along the way.
That is really fantastic to hear, and I hope all the fans out there recognise that and support those sponsors. It's really nice to have sponsors that are willing to stick with us, especially during this sort of adversity. Big question, is there any hope of hockey at all in 2020? I mean, obviously with the lockdown happening in Victoria, we've got cases in Sydney now. There were some ideas that we might be able to have like a New South Wales ACT type playoff, but obviously now that's looking ever so much less likely. Yeah. What are we thinking?
We're going to do something. Personal mission to have some hockey in 2020. After the postponement, a lot of the teams, like you mentioned, along the East Coast started talking about doing a mini competition with the city teams in Newcastle, and we're not going to participate in that. Same issue. It's just not worth the risk of sending our players up there. We've been lucky here in Canberra to be able to live life relatively comfortably, so it's not worth the risk. So we're going to do something locally. The other thing, a couple things to keep in mind there is, first off, the rink is going through a, let's say, a makeover is probably the right word for it. John and the team have been putting a ton of effort into just sprucing up some of the areas around the venue. So we'll wait for that to finish up. But the other thing to keep in mind is, at this point, I consider the fact that we owe this to some of our members. I don't know if you remember, but a couple of months ago would have been, we went out to the members and said, listen, we're likely not going to have a season. A lot of the members had already paid us their membership fee. So we gave 3 options to the members. You said you could either, 1, we'll refund the money, 2, you could transfer your membership to 2021, or 3, you can take the plunge and donate that money to the club. An overwhelming number of members decided to do that donation option. And that just kind of reinvigorated me to say, this community is so strong. And believe me, that played a role in your earlier question about our financial health. Plays a role. Being able to do that is massively beneficial for the club. But I now think that we owe those people something. So we're going to have some sort of hockey weekend, depending upon when the rink is back open and how things are looking with the COVID situation. I've made it my personal mission, Murray. We're going to do something this year.
We're going to see you on the ice in that hockey weekend?
That, I can tell you, will definitely not happen. But the rest of it, we hope to happen.
We've had quite a few questions from people leading up to this that they wanted to ask you, and one of which I think you've already answered from Warren Price. Will there be hockey this year? We're all hoping that can happen, and Warren, in our next episode, I'm sure hopefully we'll have some more further developments along that front. Kathleen Beck asked, do player contracts get held with the cancellation?
Kathleen, I think, listen, there's probably 2 questions here. One is the legality of the contracts. I mean, there are 2020 contracts generally outside of maybe the multiple year contracts, but they're contract for the 2020 season, which means they'll probably not be held specifically. The practical side of it is also, this is such an aberration of a season and such an aberration of a year that we're kind of, regardless of what the contract says, the paperwork says, we're going to do the right thing and kind of write this off as a wash and look in 2021 as fresh. So the guys that we had discussed as a 2020 plan, we won't hold them to any of that. We're just going to look at 2021 as a fresh season and start from scratch. That said, we're lucky here. We've got a lot of players that are so committed to this team and so committed to bringing a championship back in that conversation, I don't want to say it's easy, because you really want to make sure those contract conversations go well and go correctly. But we know with a lot of our diehard players, the conversation is much more logistical and how can we make something work. And I expect to have a roster in 2021 that looks very similar to what it was going to look like in 2020.
Fantastic. I think some of the other questions we've actually answered in the conversation. So Brody was asking, will the Braves survive financially? I think we can say pretty clearly that's going to be the case. Sonny Singh, he'd like a pay rise.
Oh, what do you know? Okay, that's nice. It's a great question. Listen, if anyone in the organization deserves a pay rise, it's probably you, Murray. But Sonny's somewhere on the list. No, just kidding. Sonny has done a fantastic job in keeping the wheels turning while the bus has proverbially been parked this season, and deserves a lot of credit for that. So, son, let's go have a coffee and we'll talk it through.
Yeah, maybe an enthusiasm bonus might be on the cards there. Matthew Love has asked, could we see collaboration between Brave and IHACT on some local hockey?
Definitely. We had, now it seems like about 100 years ago, but just before what was meant to be the start of the season, sometime in early March, we had a conversation with the heads at Ice Hockey ACT and started to put together a collaboration plan. There's no question that the success of the Brave and the success of ice hockey ACT are intrinsically and forever linked. One does not exist without the other, and one does not succeed without the other. And we had just started to put that collaboration plan together. Some of those items include participation and player development at the young levels, where our players can play a big role in getting some of their knowledge and getting into those little sponges on skates that are out there learning how to play the game. Also, it goes into things like facility development and making sure that we can do our part in the areas of the rink that we control to ensure that the standard of play is high and the guys have all the equipment they need on the ice. So we had just started to put those plans together before everything happened, but we'll pick those conversations back up. I've got no question. We've also been working closely with the Junior Brave program, which was something that Rumo has started. I think last year is when he sort of officially kicked it off. And we were lucky enough to have one of the Brave sponsors, RSM, come on as the premier sponsor of that program. And he's doing a fantastic job at kind of bridging that gap between what the Brave does and what Ice Hockey ACTs does, and pick some of those players and start to get them ready for life in the AIHL. So we feel that that is an absolutely critical part of the success of the Brave. We had kind of a false start this season on getting an official collaboration going, but kind of looking forward into 2021, that's going to be top of the list.
That's fantastic, and I think that's all the questions we've got, and that's probably all we've got time for today. But thanks for giving that insight for us, Dan. I think that's really important for the community. Hopefully, we see something back at the Brave Cape this year, just to give us a little bit of Australian hockey. Thankfully, we are starting to see some hockey finally coming out of the States with the NHL. I know I'm glued to my stream and NHL TV watching those. But thanks, guys, for tuning in. Tune in for our next episode of Brave Live to watch all of the shenanigans that are going to go on with that, including some Mario Kart. And we'll be back in a few weeks right here.